One way that us skeptics will trounce a fundamentalist Christian is by showing that there is no evidence that historical figures in the Bible even existed. But stay tuned, for they have recently uncovered actual concrete evidence which may give case to prove that one of their prophets may very well have existed. So we'll take a look and also see what this means in terms of the fabled prophecies. The prophet I'm talking about is the one that the fundamentalist Christians, as well as any other Christians, will use as one of their greatest debate points of proof of Christ's legitimacy as well as his resurrection. Of course, I'm talking about the well-known Isaiah. The figure Isaiah in the Bible was known for many different types of prophecies. He supposedly foretold that the kingdom of Judah would not be taken over by Assyria. He is stated to have predicted not only the coming of Christ, but his execution and resurrection as well, and gives us indication of the coming of the last days. And a very easy way to negate whether the prophecies were legitimate or not is to simply show that there is no evidence that the man existed at all. However, only in the last few years, archaeologists may have uncovered something that shows that Isaiah did. Isaiah is noted to live somewhere between the 7th and 8th centuries before Christ, many scholars putting his time on earth at 740s BC. And he was a direct resident of the House of David, commonly known as the Kingdom of Judah. He is thought to have come from the upper class and served as some sort of court official or counselor to the kings, living through 4 of their reigns, the most notable being the last 2, serving King Ahaz, who was thought to be the 13th successor of David, and then Ahaz's son, King Hezekiah, the 14th successor. Now, it's important to note the actual historical times that these people lived in. The Kingdom of Judah largely prospered under the vassalage of Assyria, which today makes up parts of Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Syria. Under King Ahaz, the Kingdom of Judah prospered very well under Assyria. However, his son, Hezekiah, made an alliance with the king of Egypt and threw rebellion at Assyria, in which the Assyrian army invaded and brought great destruction to the Kingdom of Judah. And it is said that Isaiah, serving to the ear of the king, foretold to him that Assyria would never take over, in which, interestingly enough, after the Assyrian army had victory at their hands, withdrew. I've read some scholars believe that there was a mice infestation, which brought the entire army to its knees with the spread of disease. And of course, the Christian version is that an angel descended on the Assyrian army and killed almost 200,000 of them, forcing their retreat. So this figure of Isaiah seemed to have some sort of prominent position if he was an advisor to 4 kings. And I'm going to talk about specific prophecies concerning Christ and whether they contain validity or not in later videos. But the first question we have to ask for legitimacy is, did the man even exist at all? Well, interestingly enough, in February of 2018, there was an excavation at the Temple Mount at the southern end of Jerusalem, led by Dr. Eilat Mazar, in which an almost complete bulla, or stamped seal made of soft clay or metal, that was used for legal documentation, that had imprinted on it the name of Isaiah, or Yeshayahu in Hebrew, which is the name for Isaiah. And interestingly enough, they have 3 out of 4 letters as well, which would have spelled the word prophet after his name. But this is where it gets sticky. The upper left part of the seal is broken off, which would have contained the 4th letter. And it seems strange because it doesn't equate in English, but one missing letter can have a great deal of variety and context for a word in Hebrew. The 4th letter could have meant, when translated with the other 3, stating certain indicators of lineage or extension of his familiar name. But it gets a little bit more interesting, because 3 years earlier, the same team found another seal completely intact 10 feet away from where they found the one inscripting the name Isaiah. And this fully intact seal, 13 by 12 millimeters, read, "Belonged to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah." And this is what gives validity to the first seal that they found. For they have found other various seals containing the name Isaiah, which were traced to different lineages that had nothing to do with the Bible. But this was very interesting that these 2 seals were found within 10 feet of each other, and that the seal for Isaiah almost says prophet on the seal. So we've got the king confirmed, 10 feet away another seal from someone who may have been his advisor, right in that Jerusalem area where a king and his advisor would reside. If only we had that last letter on Isaiah's seal, with the seal completely intact, we could have known for sure, which must have greatly frustrated the archaeologists, because they only needed a couple more millimeters on the seal to completely confirm or deny. But you put together the fact that the king's seal was right next to Isaiah's, that certainly gives it a lot more validity. It is true that in the past I've searched for proof of all the prophets' existence, but for this supposed prophet, Isaiah, I can't 100% confirm it, but I think I'd be willing to bet some significant money on the man's existence. Now here's the problem. Once again, the Institute for Creation Research, as well as the Christian fundamentalist and evangelist communities, have gone off the deep end with this. As I said, we're going to go through clusters of prophecies in later videos, but the near proof that this man existed does not validate prophecies written. Every time there's something like this that's discovered, the Institute for Creation Research writes a short article, and they did with this one. And once again, this is my problem with the Christian fundamentalists. They stated in my sources in the description that we have proof that all these historical figures in the Bible existed. No, we don't. We have near proof that one man existed. And I'm sure in later videos I'm going to find evidence for other historical figures existing, and we're going to find no evidence whatsoever for other biblical figures existing at all. You can't take one possible fact that strongly shows that one biblical figure existed and then say that that proves that the Bible is the literal word of God and that every character in the Bible is accurate. For instance, there is a king who may have very well resembled who the Bible calls David, but it doesn't mean that all the descriptions of this David's life portrayed by the Bible are even remotely accurate. What we have in Isaiah is a man, most likely some sort of aristocrat or at least from the upper class, who probably served in a position that was much more than just a mere scribe, who more than likely had a role as an advisor type during the reign of multiple kings in the kingdom of Judah. And we may even indeed find that he called himself a prophet or others did so. Kings used fortune teller types all the time back then. You can't take some factual evidence, even if it's ironclad, that proves the existence of a historical figure, and then make that leap of faith, stating that because of his existence, that gives credence to the validity of all the prophecies as well. Historians, scholars, and biblical archaeologists will come up with evidence for one thing at a time. You can't just throw a blanket stating that this means that everything in the Bible is true. Now, I'm a fair guy and not just going to say that just because we don't have 100% proof that we can completely discount the existence of Isaiah. I would go ahead and say that what I've seen and read, and I've read a great deal about it in my past and recently in the last few weeks, and the evidence I see is enough to convince me that the man actually existed. Maybe it's not enough for you, and that's fine. But there's no evidence that Isaiah told of a prophecy stating that the Assyrian army would never take over the kingdom of Judah. And as far as his other prophecies concerning the birth of Jesus Christ, his execution and resurrection, as well as his prophecies on the last days, we will explore even further and see if there's enough evidence to make me walk off the pasture of the skeptic. But if you'd like to read something that I can guarantee is fiction, check out my novel, The Second Fall, an offbeat apocalypse sure to offend the fundamentalist. On Amazon now, link is in the video description as well as a banner, and I will see you next time as we use the sword of reason and reality to once again thrust into the heart of ignorance.